start at the beginning. So you met John Herdman at quite a young age, obviously, and you played futsal under him at about 12 years old. What do you remember from that time, and how did it sort of shape your early love for the game?
Yeah, I think, for me, what it does tell you is having an inspiring coach really can have a lasting impact on a player or future coaches. I think for me at that time, I played every night, but then I think my love for teaching, coaching developed very, very, very quickly. I'd be down there every night, not only for my own session, but I think like helping out and starting to get my hours in at a very, very young age. And really that was the start of my love for coaching, knowing that probably I wasn't going to go and play for England at the highest level. So I think for me, a message in that is getting into the game really early. Players who maybe take coaching badges is going to help them get that love and get a feel for coaching to help them go on and be coaches in the future.
And speaking of those early coaching years, obviously you were at Everton. What were you sort of learning about yourself in the game at that stage?
Yeah, so when I was at Everton, I actually was at university doing a science and football degree, and I remember at the time, there was a female coach, Mo Marley, who was a very inspirational female coach, and probably a few that were in the game in England. And I emailed and said, I'd love to come down, watch a session here and there. And I remember for probably a 6-month period, I volunteered every night down at Everton Football Club. And, at that time, you put out a few cones, you do the warm-up, and then you get more and more involved. And I think, again, like perseverance and putting the hours in really does make a difference. And at that time, I did analysis. She was ahead of her time then, right? We're talking many, many years ago, and I did a lot of analysis for her to get ready for FA Cups against Arsenal, and did warm-ups and passing patterns and things like that. So I think for me, it was just getting hours on the grass and being around an inspirational female coach, which for me was the first time in my career. So I think when I was actually 16, I went out to Invercargill. John was down there coaching at Southland Soccer, and I think for me, I went out there, I played, I coached at football in schools, and I guess for me at that time, I fell in love with New Zealand, and people laugh, I fell in love with Invercargill, but it was a really cool experience for a 16-year-old from a very, very small town. And then after university, after my time with Everton, I worked at the English FA as a Girls and Women's Development Officer, and then the opportunity to come to New Zealand as a Regional Coach Development Officer and delivering coaching courses. It was actually here in Wellington, and it was part of a national strategy, 7 officers around the country. And for me at that time, I'd also done my coach education and coach educator courses in England. So I came out in New Zealand 2008 to 2013, and in that period, coach development officer, then head of women's football. And then when John went off to coach the Canadian women's national team, I then was the head of football development for, the whole football plan, which, for a few years really threw myself into that. And even to this day, I think working with some players here at the Wellington Phoenix, they about that time would have been at your Western Springs and, places I used to visit on a Saturday morning, first kicks, fun football. So I think coming back here is a bit of a full circle moment, right? Where you've had an impact on grassroots football, women's development, the talent pathway. A lot of the players now laugh about the times that, the national talent centres that I used to see and head up. In that, these players have come all the way through that pathway, and I think that's quite cool to see, the full circle moment of players coming out of a system that was aligned. So yeah, and then obviously the head of football role, and then the Canada role came up with John over there to coach the under-17 women's team, and I guess the whole talent pathway and trying to align that in Canada. And so yeah, I guess I left New Zealand to start that journey in Canada.
And so obviously, after establishing yourself in Canada, you were the head coach of the age group sides as well. And then you stepped into the women's team, the England women's team, as assistant coach under Phil Neville. Take us through that whole experience from, the transition from Canada.
Yeah, so I think for me in Canada, a bit like in New Zealand, you wear many hats, right? And at that time I was under 17s head coach, I was with the 20s, I was assistant coach, you know, going to the World Cup in Rio 2016. But I think for me, it was a bit of a pivotal moment in my career, you know, wearing a lot of hats and probably running in and out of camps. And I think the opportunity for me to go and work with your own country, but also to do one job and do it well. And I think it was a turning point in my coaching career because I just was a senior coach working under Phil Neville, I think, you know, who had played for probably arguably the greatest manager of all time in Sir Alex Ferguson. And for me, it was a bit of a brave decision, I think, to go down my own path. You know, you look at my coaching career, it's probably 10, 12 years under the same leader, to then, you know, break off and go and, you know, chase my own dream a little bit. I think for me, that was a pivotal moment for me as a coach to find out who I am and what you know, two very, very different ways of doing things. And yeah, I guess going back home to England, we just had a little boy, actually 9 weeks old, so it was a big transition to head back to England. But I think for me, that time, the women's game had just absolutely taken off in the UK. A World Cup 2019 in France. And I thoroughly enjoyed, but really got out of my comfort zone. I think it really challenged me as a coach. You're working with, you know, Lucy Bronze, Fran Kirby at that time. It was a top team. And yeah, I think I just got to try and be the best senior coach I could be, and just got to do one job in being an assistant coach. And I think when I look at my career that eventually went on to win a gold medal, I think working with England and doing things differently allowed me to go back into Canada and be a totally different coach, but probably more authentic to who I was as a coach. And I think you have to do that for someone developing themselves. You have to get different experiences to really, you know, accumulate them and know who you are as a coach when it really matters.
And yeah, as you mentioned, you went back to Canada and you were the head coach of the senior women's side. How did that transition sort of go from, you know, going from Canada to England to Canada? You know, how did that all unfold?
Yeah, and I think it was a really important move going back, because I think at the time I was probably seen as the youth coach, or, you know, John's right-hand woman. And I think to go in as your own coach at a senior level for a team who'd done back-to-back bronze medals, but were on a little bit of a, you could say, a slump. That, you know, they hadn't had a great World Cup. Their results against top 10 teams had really dropped. So for me, going in and returning back somewhere with a big, bold vision, right? I went in there and talked about changing the colour of the medal, right? Bronze, and really I knew that I had a big job on my hands in, I think I had 3 or 4 camps before the Olympic Games in Tokyo. But I knew I needed to set a big, bold vision and go in there and change some things. I think the team had got quite comfortable, and so really set a big, bold vision of changing the colour of the medal, which in, you know, a 6-month period we managed to do. And it was probably very unexpected at the time based on the trajectory of the team. But I think for me as a coach, one of the lessons I've learned in that, how that journey came about and how it unfolded, is the importance of a challenge. You know, I think all players respond to challenges. I think as a coach, you have to see things in people that maybe they don't see in themselves sometimes, and then being sort of challenged and developed is really, really important. And I think for me, experiencing that tournament in the COVID reality was also a bit of a unique experience, right? You can't leave your hotel, you're only allowed to go to a training pitch. And for Canada, we'd never won Game 5, right? To win a bronze medal, we'd never quite got to that moment of winning Game 5, which for us, in that rivalry of Canada-US, we'd never beaten them for 20 years, and that Game 5 happened to be arch rivals. It'd be like New Zealand, Australia, semi-final of Olympic Games, and it was the ultimate, and in many ways it felt like the final. And to go and do that, I think I knew going into that final that once we'd done that, we could go all the way and ultimately achieve the gold medal, which was really special.
And looking back on your time with Canada, what are you actually most proud of?
Yeah, I think the highs and lows. I think the team, you know, it's notoriously done well at Olympic Games, but World Cups seem to, you know, never go all the way. I think for me is to be bold enough to set that big, bold vision, put it out in the universe, and then see a group of players grab hold of that and really believe that they could go all the way. And I think it was a moment in the country, and I say this now in my Phoenix role, where the whole country stopped and people will always remember where they were in that moment, right? We missed that. We were in Tokyo in a bubble and in a COVID reality, but at the end of the day, the whole country did stop. And for many players in the future, that moment was the moment they fell in love with the sport in terms of whether it be coaching, playing. So for me, ultimately, the gold medal is the proudest moment to see a group of players go and achieve something special and to make a country stop and really make it a women's football country.
And then, I guess, speaking of the Phoenix, you know, you came back here after Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Did your connection to New Zealand kind of play a big part in your decision to come back to the Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my wife's a Kiwi, my little boy is a Kiwi, and I guess I've spent some critical years of my career being here in New Zealand, and I just happened to be in New Zealand at that time. And I think it feels really special to be back in Wellington, right? I started here in 2008. You fast forward many years and here I am. And I think for me, from afar, you know, you have a home World Cup here, right? So the 2008 was an under-17 World Cup. There's a pivotal moment when I was here the first time. I got to experience the Australia-New Zealand World Cup. And I think for me coming back, it was an opportunity to allow people to see an inspiring team week in, week out. You know, we always talked about in Canada that it's a once every 4-year moment. But to do that in a season and week to week where you can either turn up live or turn on your TV, see some of the best football fans week in, week out, but also to go and do something that had never been done before, right? To be a group that was pioneers for professional women's sport. And I think to bring people like CJ Bott back, who's had an incredible career both for the football ferns but also overseas, back in her home city, and to try and make history, right? And be part of that team that went on to do something where not only Wellington, but again, where the whole country has an opportunity to say, I remember when I was at this moment when the Wellington Phoenix did X, Y, Z. And I think that's something, that big vision is something that very quickly I felt I needed to do, to put in place, to really drive this team to go and do something special, not only for the team, for the club, but I think for the country and women's sport and women's football.
And with this being sort of, I guess, the club's strongest season, with the team sort of pushing towards the finals, what is it that clicked this year with the team and you?
I think a couple of things. I think, you know, the A-League, you have 5 visa spots, and in many ways, 5 people who have no connection to this country land here for a season. They may be at a point in their career where they either want to go on to bigger and better things or they're winding down from their career. And I was really strong that whoever comes and plays for this club has to understand what it means to New Zealand, to Wellington, to the club, and what it means to represent this city. And I think what we've done a really good job of as a club is to really bring in New Zealand culture, the heritage, you know, what it means to be in Wellington. And whenever we step on a football field, everybody who puts that shirt on knows what it means. So I think that connection to the city, to the country, and we have a bigger purpose of not just going and playing football and playing well and all the X's and O's. It's about inspiring the next generation of young players in this country, boys or girls, and really putting us on the map. And I think so far the team have done a really good job of that. But we have this burning desire to go much further than that, right? Not just to win a football match, to make playoffs. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it, right? It's what people see on a pitch, and I think the team have epitomised that, right? They've had setbacks, we've had injuries. You get to see the next player up, young players like a Pia Vlock, you know, take her moment and again inspire a whole generation of people, and I think that's the most important thing.
And speaking of inspiring sort of the next generation, what excites you the most about the future of women's football in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think what I know about Kiwis is they have a unique mindset. We punch above our weight, and I think what is really special for me to see is the talent coming through and the mindset, and you match that with the athleticism, the mindset, and I think New Zealand has a really bright future. I think if we can align top to bottom the women's game, develop more female coaches, and I really think, I mean, we're showing it, right? We're competing with Australian teams and doing very, very well. And this team has a lot of Kiwis in it, and I think that speaks volumes to where the football ferns, the youth teams, and can be on the world stage with the right vision, the right mindset, and the right belief of those who put the shirt on.
And yeah, final question, I guess. Would you say that your journey has sort of come full circle, being back in New Zealand again?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, landing here in New Zealand again, I always said that it felt a bit like home, right? A big part of my career and probably most pivotal points in my career have been here. I think what's been really exciting is to see the game now, right? Many, many years later, but also the people in the game. I think there's a lot of people who are still doing everything they can for this game in this country, and I think to reconnect with them and connect with them when I got back here is really cool. And the players that I've got in front of me, and I think, like, yeah, you have a really bright future, and I think that's what excites me the most.